Hello, and welcome back to the channel and episode whatever of me having no clue how to do intros and not be super awkward. But those things aside, we're going to talk about energy allocation today and how absolutely critical this is if you want to be a high performer. And in case you're wondering, like, what are the definitions of what a high performer is? A high performer in my textbook is somebody that has a clear vision that they can consistently execute upon despite running into failures, because failures are just opportunities to find a different pathway. Now, in order to do that and actually navigate around those spaces that most of us would deem failures and roadblocks, high performers have the capacity to integrate, understand, and move on. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, but we're going to be talking about it in a systematic way, the way that we would try to do in any way, shape, or form. So here's exactly how this has broken down when I've supported executives, business owners, entrepreneurs, whatever the heck it is. The next scale beyond where you're currently at is just the next version of creativity beyond failure. However, most of us have to answer this very simple question. Am I lacking the energy to prioritize, or is my ability to prioritize stealing all my energy? And if you're wondering, I'm not going to gatekeep this to like the last 30 seconds and then tell you, subscribe. The thing with it is it's both. And we have to understand that once we hit failure, we either need to try a different alternative or we need to reprioritize and gather up our resources again. But this is where most business owners and people in life just fall off. The wheels of consistency completely stop turning. And that's because when we see failure, oftentimes it's a reflection, not on the thing itself, but we take it personally. So what we're going to talk about today is exactly that. How do we get enough internal resources, whether that's energy, acetylcholine, and good sleep, to actually deal with the failures as they come? And then at the end of this, and yes, at the end of this, there's going to be a small strategy to actually integrate failure into a different perspective. But before doing that, we actually need to have fuel to make that progress. So we're going to talk about the leaky buckets in most people's day, starting off with the most common one, which is sleep. There is a reason that every single one of my private clients has to have an Oura ring, and it's because I need to monitor, or wish to strongly monitor, what their sleep and daily availability is. And this is not something for the people that are running 7- and 8-figure companies that we want to guess on. It's something that I want to say, no, this is what we have availability for. And yes, if you don't have the availability today, which means we have to steal resources from tomorrow, that is an okay strategy as long as there are recovery systems and metrics in place. Where the common person typically falls off is that they will take from tomorrow to meet today's needs, and then there's no recovery in process. So the first thing that I want to talk about here in order to execute the way that these high performers do is getting adequate sleep. 5 years ago, before I became what I would call today as successful, I was really not prioritizing sleep or things that brought me joy. And joy for me and playfulness turned out to be one of the fueling factors that allow me to be creative and find alternative solutions, which for all of my clients is the reason most of them hire me, is that I have the capacity to creatively see what they cannot. And that is what allows my business to thrive. I now understand today how absolutely critical and how much not prioritizing that actually cost me. On top of that, though, the other thing that we have to discuss here is ensuring that you have good routines to support the things that make you valuable. But we really have to talk about the boring thing first, which is sleep, diet, exercise. No matter what, at the end of the day, a high performer that's not executing on the bare minimum of sleep and decent nutrition and some kind of movement every single day will always hit glass ceilings and constantly self-sabotage and break themselves back down. Now, there is insane amounts of research out there showing how absolutely important exercise is, and the more muscle density you have, the easier it is to process carbohydrates and the easier it is to deal with cholesterol. The really cool thing that I love about exercise is that it teaches your body what to do with cortisol, and that cortisol flushing through your system is not something to run or fear from, it's something to work into. That's what exercise, lifting weights, running, the assault bike, my entire garage is designed to better befriend my system's association and relationship with cortisol. However, I know we're using the word whatever here, just in abundance, All of that is contingent upon your availability to do the hard thing when the easy thing is available. And the crippling factor to that is sleep. If you're not measuring or monitoring your sleep, at least in the lens of how I work with my clients, you are truly leaving so much money on the table. You're not able to actually execute to the capacity that is available to you. And here's the reason why. Imagine that there is a neuron here, and this neuron is firing to this neuron. Now, what is over here and what is over here versus what's right here is called a synaptic cleft. Neuron, neuron, synaptic cleft. So this neuron is not physically connected to this one. In fact, there's a space in between it that we call the synaptic cleft. So this is where neurotransmitters, neuropeptides, and all kinds of other good chemicals are communicating back and forth between those neurons. Now, the one that I want to talk about here is acetylcholine. Acetylcholine is released a lot of the times in the brain as a primary neurotransmitter to allow the passage of those messages down the pipeline. When acetylcholine gets sent from this neuron between the synaptic cleft and collects on this one, it's not a perfect system, meaning that in between here, there's going to be some acetylcholine left over. And this is not a flaw, but it's also by design. What we've discovered is that drowsiness and the effect of that drowsiness has a correlation directly to the amount of acetylcholine left over in that synaptic cleft. And if you're wondering, how does coffee work in the morning? Well, it helps remove that acetylcholine that is not bound in the synaptic cleft, because the less acetylcholine in that synaptic cleft, the more energy or perceived energy that our system thinks we have, which is why coffee works so well. But as the day goes by, it builds up more and more. So hopefully you're asking yourself the question right now, well, what do I do with that? How do I get that out of the way? And there's a handful of ways to do it, but there's one that beats them all, and it is rest, recovery, but it's sleep. During sleep, the glymphatic system, which I've talked about a ton in our other videos that have to do with brain fog, glymphatic system clears out the metabolites from that synaptic cleft so that you can take more clear-headed action the next day. And sleep is one of those primary factors. So there's two things I want you to remember for good quality sleep. Number one, the room needs to be dark. And when I say dark, I mean it. Cover up as much light as you possibly can and remove all distractions. That includes noise. I don't bring cell phones in. I don't have a TV in my bedroom. All of those things have been proven, not only historically through research, but historically on my Oura Ring data, to disrupt my sleep significantly. It is also why, if you've ever seen any videos of me running around the internet in my house doesn't have a lot of white lights except in the recording studio here in my office, because they're disruptive to my nervous system. The red lights and the orange lights and all the other things that I have in my house are designed to maintain a healthy circadian biology so that my nervous system can continually make progress in the ways that are beneficial. So all of this to say, if you want to make more progress and be more successful in your life and days and execute and have more executive function, one of those limiting factors is going to be how well you're getting sleep. Again, this is an entire dialogue that we need to dive into, but at the bare basics, consider getting an Oura Ring. I do have affiliate links and things like that, not because I'm trying to get a bunch of money, but why not, realistically? Because I support them so much, and I've been supporting them for a lot of years because they really have made a huge difference in the lives of my clients and in the life of myself. Now, the next phase of what we want to do and how we want to execute up and beyond that is really looking for schedule and certainty. But more importantly, while I've talked about certainty and predictability in the past, what's really critical and important here to recognize is seasonal certainty. Which means right now during this season of life and predictability, you need to know that you might have to lean in a totally different way than how you have in the past. That means potentially giving up some things and reintroducing different subjects and categories or actions in your life that are going to make different executable steps. Now, this is a bit of a different strategy than most people typically talk about. However, what I recognize is that if you consistently are adding things to your life and never removing them, what ends up happening is burnout. I see it every single day. I see it in my DMs. I see it in my email box. People are always wondering, I'm so burnt out and I really don't have an explanation why or what. The clear explanation for why that is very simple. You have simply run out of resources. You're spread so thin and you've stolen enough from tomorrow to meet today's needs that you just don't have the resources to add one more thing. This is why when we look at the literature, most people that are these high performer CEOs and executives or entrepreneurs, media companies, agencies, whatever the heck it is, they're doing 2 to 3 priorities per day. That is it. So if you're thinking, I'm going to get 5 to 10 things done per day, I'm going to consider for you that you're spread way too thin and your ability to execute is going to be dramatically decreased. Not because there's something wrong with you, but that's just the standard that most of us have seen. And if you're somebody that has employees, I highly recommend you look into the literature that has been going on both in Germany and in Europe, taking a deeper dive into what happens when we reduce work hours. Workload remains the same, but what we've recognized is that people are just stretching it through the day. And people don't want to take a pay cut, but if they can make the same amount of money and execute more and the business can make more money, turns out that everyone gets in this win-win scenario, which is something that I constantly speak at leadership conferences, something I constantly speak at when I'm consulting, and I'm hoping that this is going to land in the right ears of a handful of folks here. Up and beyond that, a few things I want you to take into consideration here. Energy is necessary to prioritize. I think we all know that. And at the same time, one of those key things that we need to do is figure out a strategy to take stock and inventory. So if you look at your calendar, bank statement, and inventory on relationships that are closest to you, it is going to show you where you're currently valuing, thus prioritizing things in your life. And if those things, take some stock and inventory, pause the video. You're not going to pause the video. I know you're not. But if you're not taking stock and inventory in some of those strategies and programs, it is going to create more contrast and that spread thin effect. The problem with being spread thin like that is often we get punctured by stress. Imagine taking a 2 inch piece of tin and trying to puncture it with a pencil. It doesn't really work. That's a lot of tin. However, if you try to do that with tin foil, it's obviously very easy to puncture. Now, I'm obviously trying to translate here from empirical to English, and it didn't work really well, but I'm hoping that the metaphor is coming through. Up and beyond that, that spread thing effect really gets condensed when we can reprioritize and get our energy back in. This is where we're going to start to bridge the conversation into sensory sensitivity. And I want you to think about over the last week, what are some of the environments, places that were taking a ton of energy for you to participate, quote unquote, normally inside of. For me, I've talked about this before, leaving dishes in the sink is a sensory sensitivity to me because it leaves open loops. Sticky fingers is another big thing for me. Can't do it. Certain sounds, the vacuum running in the neighbor's house or whatever the heck it is. There are all of these different things that most of us have awareness of. My invitation for you is to bust out the journal, your favorite pen, and really write these things down. By doing so, you are inviting your nervous system to really take a deeper stock and inventory in the following conversations that allow you to sink and settle into understanding really how you want to participate in the world, reality. Because effort and consistency with repeated rewards is what adds the tag to the events that you're doing to your brain to say that these things are important and we want to prioritize them. Beyond that, we just have to take stock every day, and Oura Ring is another great tool to really take inventory and say, oh, this is where I got exhausted today. I worked out too much, which for a lot of people in the fitness industry is a very real thing, that you're just working out too much too often. So really start to take those things into consideration and really calibrate in what are the handful of things that are going to make me more valuable in my everyday life and the lives of the people that I'm surrounded with. If this video was valuable to you, please consider hitting the subscribe button. And if you're a business owner or somebody struggling with burnout, please check the links down below and consider joining some of our amazing groups that are focused on building systems and strategies just like this in an amazing community designed for humans, not designed for influencey people. It's designed to get down to business. All right, guys, I'll see you on the next one. Have an amazing day.